Like even I remember the Zac game. They should have won that game.
This is Loyota, a current analyst and scout for Immortals. What you didn't know, though, is that he was the head analyst for that famous 2016 Immortals roster with Huni and Reignover. And he was also the head of scouting for the last 4 years for FlyQuest. Thank you for Masu, by the way. In this episode of the LS Show, we talk about everything Shopify, breaking down their draft reasonings.
Again, I think this tank comp, for instance, could work against my team, because I think my team plays...
The player caliber?
I don't know. Honestly, he's probably between like 4 and 6.
And finding out where the blame really lies and how they can improve.
I don't mean to be mean, but like it is a little bit. So what, you want to go straight into his drafts?
Yeah, let's talk about Shopify drafts. Why are they the only people playing tank mids? And do you think it's good?
So going into the new season, of course, like tank items got a nice buff, especially MR items. Like those were probably the most broken tank items outside of Frozen Heart. Like, you know, like Rookern or whatever it's called. Like that was like the biggest, like most OP thing. Like you got a fat shield and a ton of MR. And the idea is just that, well, I can play a tank mid who will just absorb the pressure and everything. And then we'll suddenly have a secondary frontliner, and then our jungler can play carry, and that's it. I mean, literally that's just it. And it seemed like Shopify were really down to go that direction. Compared to any of the other teams. Like I know a few teams like messed with tank mids, but in the end of the day, like everyone decided to go more into things like Akali, which was broken because like AP mana items were heavily nerfed, and all the AP HP items were really buffed. Like especially like Proto Belt and Storm Razor or Storm. What's it called?
Storm Surge.
Storm Surge, there we go. Like those two items were ridiculously broken. So naturally, like champions who didn't need to depend on mana resources were rather good. Which led to, again, like teams picking Akali, and then also teams picking some AP junglers that are like that, like Lilia. And then we saw even just picking AP champions mid but they didn't even tech into mana items, right? Like they just kind of played on like these big, strong like active damage items. And for whatever reason, like I said, Shopify decided to go this route and have Bugi on the carries. And funny enough, that actually is their most winning strategy. Like if you look at the games they've won, like him playing Brand with like Sion mid, Lilia with Sion, those are the games they're doing the best. Like even I remember the Zac game. They should have won that game. Like Insanity just went too far. They overextended, and what was it against FlyQuest?
It was, yeah. Inspired was on Poppy and Jensen was on Ori, yeah.
Yeah, it was against FlyQuest, and I remember the Bwipo's Udyr flanking didn't do anything, and then he just overextended. FlyQuest turned it around, and then they kind of just, once they lost Baron, the initiative was gone and the game was over. But their highest success has actually come from tank mids, like these like more like just I absorb pressure and then Bugi's on a carry and we can just win out that way. And I think that's not necessarily bad for them. But long term, it's not going to work because naturally the better players you face, the better teams get. You know, you have a true carry in mid getting farm, getting fed. It's going to be hard to deal with. And your players are not good enough to where you can just depend on this. Like, Fakegod is not good enough in lane with enough of a champ pool where I can trust having a tank mid every game is going to be good. Like, I could not trust that as the main strategy. Bot lane, I think it really depends, because in the first week, Shopify ran Lucian comps. And Turtle actually was probably one of the best users in the West of Lucian, funny enough. Like, they actually pressed their lead, and he took the risks in fights to actually create situations, and they knew to fight for buffs in mid game with it. So their strategy with Lucian was actually not half bad. They still lost those games naturally, and of course the whole ride of like Lucian's bad, no one should be picking Lucian, you know. So naturally they just kind of moved away from it, especially because Bvoy came in, but they had a pretty good strategy with that. And Bvoy, the way they draft with him, he doesn't. If you look at his like history of picks, he does not really like the kind of guy who does like a ton of like peculiar picks, like I guess you could say. He's not the type of person to play Ziggs or things like that. He likes this the mainline carries like Xayah, Philios, like Zeri, Kalista, Varus. They're really down for that. And that's just how he's always played anyways. Like if you watch him in like the Brazilian league and whatever, he would even in like situations where he doesn't need to create a fight instance, he will go for it. Like he's just that kind of guy. Like he will actively want to fight and create situations. So naturally being on ADs who promote that is good. If you notice that their drafts and everything, they're not playing Senna. The time they did play Senna, they played Kalista Senna. They're not like the Senna TK team or anything like that. And so they'll ban it away or like plan like how to like draft around it. So most of bot lane is like very geared towards playing to it. And top lane has always been kind of like a weak side situation. Whether he's playing Udyr, playing Aatrox, whatever. And then, like I said, that you have the tank mids, but that will only go so far. And so when they actually started playing Orianna this week, I thought that was really good to see, because if they didn't swap into playing more meta picks, which also, I don't know if you saw the pros video on LCS, but Insanity literally says, you know, I like playing the meta picks and everything. It's like, I didn't even like it was a bad Garen game too, like when I chose it. So like he does want to play these champs, but like for whatever reason they're going into these like tank mids or whatever. Maybe that's just all they know and like how confident they feel. And now they finally feel confident enough to like kind of go into this like more standard comps. But that was really good to see, because they, you know, he handled Jensen. And then they just played around mid, and that was really great. Like, it's a very good sign as a Shopify fan to see that, knowing that if this happens more, okay. And of course, naturally, as you know, like, Bvoy coming in week 2, where, like, I think he came in at, like, the end of week 1, like, being physically present. I think he was at the end of week 1, but of course they're not going to play him because he didn't practice yet. The break is going to be really important, because now they can actually, like, kind of play catch up and get things a little bit more adjusted towards what they've been doing. But I think currently with how their drafts are going, yeah, I think it's good that Insanity's actually moving away from tanks. And it's, you know, he still can bust it out, but it's good to move away and work up the Orianna, the Azir, the Hui, because there was a certain point where they were literally permabanning Azir and Orianna. No, you don't want to have to do that. They also permaban Ashe, which I think is more so just like it's just not confident on Zeyzal to play it. But like they get rid of that pick. And add these mages. Top lane pool needs to increase. Like personally, like he's playing. Personally, I find that Fakegod's team fighting is not the best. Like he doesn't add the most impact in these situations. So him playing Udyr, which is a very lane-focused champion and can get good side pressure, he's won both the games on it. And there's a good reason why. And so that was good. And he plays Aatrox because he's always been known as like a bruiser player. Not the best on AP picks. He needs to expand his pool. I think Bugi is in a great spot. Like, again, he's mostly only one on carries. When he has to play, like, I would call them bridge picks, he drops too much farm. And I think in the moment, with how Fakegod has been performing, and hopefully he gets better, Bugi being able to actually impact fights higher because he's on a carry pick is very beneficial to the team. Like, I still think of his Wukong game, and where he gets like the 3 kills top or whatever, and he completely turns around. You're like, if he was on another pick, that would never happen. But he did it, and it was super hype, and like that's why he got banned the next game after that. Because it's like, well, I don't want that guy on that champ. And then with bot lane, they're just going to keep doing the same thing. They're going to get the Zyra, Khan, Aphelios, Ilio, like Varus, whatever, you know, they'll pick literally Varus in the 1-2 on red and ban Kalista just to ensure nothing bad happens spot, because it's like more prone to gank like red side bot lane than blue side. So they always try to make sure there's something favorable happening in bot lane. And then, yeah, I think keeping a style where Bugi is actually being a little bit more at the forefront, improve top pool, mid pool stabilizes, I think they'll be on a good like trajectory draft wise, like comp wise. But like all that has to fall in line to me.
So let me ask this question, because I actually agree with a lot of what you said. I thought the first game against FlyQuest, like they threw that game. It wasn't like they got demolished by FlyQuest. The first time they played them, they were winning. They threw it. Second time they played FlyQuest, there was mid gap and jungle gap, in my opinion, which is very hard to do against Inspired. But if you gave this comp the play style that Shopify are playing, like with these like immovable tanks or melees mid and a carry jungle to 2023 JDG, right? Do you think they win all their games knowing that they're better players and have better macro? Or do you, because it sounds like you think that the comps are actually okay, and if you're good at them, then maybe they're powerful, but they're just not, the players aren't good enough.
I think some of these comps have their use, and I think they can also be really good in specific teams. Because right now, LCS teams, a lot of LCS teams play slow. I actually thought it was funny that Bwipo said the exact same thing on the LCS Pros thing, and I even made a video talking about it and why I think 100 Thieves is doing so well is because they're like one of the few teams that actually plays forward all the time and makes situations. And so like FlyQuest is not one of those teams. So a tank mid is actually like okay, because nothing's really like, the only thing that's happening really is that enemy mid is just going to be farming more. That's pretty much the main thing, right? But you play against like a team that's playing more like fast, quicker, the tanks are going to be worse. Like the game's going to accelerate faster and they're going to make plays in the early game a little bit more. And that's where like you can't just be playing tank mids. So that's why I felt it was really good. Like, okay, 2 Orianna games, awesome. You know, yeah, sure, you lost against the Azir. There's some things that are like a little wacky on like what happened in that game anyways. But the fact that like, you know, you were actually promoting Insanity's play, like, because they're moving through mid more and making situations, it's like, okay, this is a really good like direction for them to go. So that's kind of like how I felt with, like, that's how I feel when it comes to these tank comps. Like, again, I think this tank comp, for instance, could work against my team, because I think my team plays slow. My team plays slow. The Team Liquid, they play slow.
Okay, that's fair. I guess that's yeah. Don't play it against. When we did play it against 100 Thieves, where the fastest pace game, they took advantage of that, and I do think that we still could have won that game because Bugi had 4 kills and he just missed every single Q on stun targets. Or he would throw it as Nautilus like ult was going, and he's just like, all you have to do is wait for Nautilus ult to hit and stun the Aatrox and then press Q, but he just throws it to Narnia. I don't know, his Lilio's a lot better than his brand, but I digress. Talk to me a little bit about, we'll go through all the players, but Bugi specifically, he's like, when I think of him, he's like a Wukong Nocturne, like, let's go dive player. I don't see him like a tank player, a Sejuani player, or like even Trundle. I think he played a Trundle game as well. The fact that he's playing AP carries, I guess, kind of lines up with the fact that he plays these dive carry champions. But even back when he was playing on, the in the PCS or in the LGL, he was always this like carry player. So how is he playing the map on Shopify? And do you think that most people have him like bottom 2, bottom 3 junglers? Is that fair?
Well, I guess I would have to just think real quick about where I would place everyone. Like, naturally, like River's at number 1, right? That's like the most obvious thing. There's guys like there's guys like Contracts, there's guys like Inspired, but personally, everyone's different in that. For instance, I think Inspired, when he has a really easy job on FlyQuest in that he just farms. Like he just has to farm. His laners will be independent. Like I don't think he's as good at accelerating the game or anything. Naturally, I don't think Jensen's also good at promoting the way like you want to play anyways. But if you see how he plays, like he's pretty smart when it comes to like trading sides and things like that. Compared to River, he's very good at being active. Same with contracts, right? I put Bugi like in between these styles in that Bugi does like being active. He does also can be fine just like farming and like clearing out. I think he's like just a bits away from being like, how would I say it? Pretty much just like a rather good jungler. Because I know there's situations where he has a lead from his initial pathing, but then he'll make like one or two mistakes. Like I know he had something right when he was playing a Maokai game, and then he decided to just go help a teammate instead of just keeping his like lead with like going to his Raptors afterwards or something. And if he did the right sequence, he would have been way ahead and been fine. But he makes like some small misplays in these situations that kind of just flatlines his strength, something that River would not do, for instance, which is like a difference between the two. And of course, one thing I really like about Bugi, and if you ever watch his streams, like he definitely does it on his stream still, is he's good at like noticing where wards are and dodging wards, which again is a good sign of a reasonably good jungler. Like you should be paying attention to where like the laner like moves. Like if let's say they're mid and they move to the right, naturally you're gonna assume, okay, they might have warded. If my mid laner doesn't say it, I need to at least know it, right? So if you're paying attention to it, which I believe he does, it's a good sign. So I feel like, I don't know. Honestly, he's probably between like 4 and 6 or so, to me. Like I think he's definitely like middle of the pack for sure. But it's not like I think of him as like necessarily a bad jungler. I actually like the things he does in the game. It's just he needs to tweak it a little bit more to become like the great jungler, you know? That's kind of like how I see Bugi.
All right, I'm happy to hear that because I felt like he had a much better last split when he was playing with on TSM. This split, he hasn't really impressed me on. I guess I'm just traumatized by that Brand game where he just kept missing his Qs, and then Aatrox would be able to heal up to full, and it's like, no, please. But yeah, I'm happy that there are things that, like you said, about him like noticing where wards are, accelerating the game, that I personally don't notice because I'm just there cheering. What about the other Korean on the team, Bvoy? I watched him play on Pain, and I thought he was rather mediocre. I didn't feel like he had that like killer instinct or he had like that great of mechanics. I felt like he was a much better version of Deftly, if you remember him.
Yeah, I know who he is.
Yeah, I felt like it was like, okay, he's not necessarily someone that's going to make the best use out of the gold that you give him, as opposed to like a Danny, for example, where, they would just like funnel a bunch of gold onto Danny, and then Danny would do his thing, and then he's just like the best team fighter in NA. So I've been positively impressed with him coming into the LCS. I think he's got pretty good mechanics, better than what he showed in Pain, at least personally from the eye test. And I think that with time, like you said, he came really late, and even like week 2 scrims, he was splitting it between him and Turtle. And I think week 3 was like the first full week that he got scrims. So how have you been impressed, or like what's your impression of Bvoy?
Honestly, I think I'm trying to remember. I remember I did some ranking of LCS players and teams at one point, and I definitely did not have him at the bottom. I know that. I had him maybe at like 5th or 6th or something like that. And yes, like it didn't have the greatest moments at times in Brazil, but I think any player that's willing to create situations and pull like attention to him in a fight is always a good thing. Naturally, of course, the next best thing is he doesn't die when that happens. Or if he does, it at least means his team cleans it up. Because if you just die for free, naturally, you're doing something horribly wrong. And my biggest complaint when I was watching him, because going into week 1 is always the weirdest thing, because you don't have, unless you have scrims on them, like you don't really have like a true tell. So like if there's any new player, so in like week 2, like there was no scrims on Bvoy. So I had to go watch like his Brazilian games and stuff like that to kind of piece together something to tell like my bot lane at least like this is how he is. And yeah, like he would, like there are situations he would enter where he tries to fight his way out of it when it's not always necessary, or maybe he goes the wrong way and this can create bad situations. But he definitely feels eager to fight and like again create a situation for you to play around, which I think is great because Turtle also kind of does that. So I think naturally him coming in, it wasn't like a huge I don't think it was going to be like some massive difference in terms of like what you're expecting from the player, which is always great because again, like if he was like a passive player all of a sudden, I think that would have been the worst. I think Shopify would have looked terrible if that was how Bvoy was, but he's not, thankfully. So far I feel like he's been kind of up to my expectations, honestly. Like I know other people were really mad about, oh my god, they're bringing Bvoy, like that guy sucks. Like that guy's like been in the scene for so long. Like why would they bring him? And I was like, I'm okay with it. I actually kind of get it. To be honest, I kind of get it. So I wasn't so upset about it personally.
Interesting. I think most people besides like Coach Seal, who actually is in Brazil right now, if they talked about Bvoy, they mentioned like, oh, maybe he doesn't, like, not that he doesn't deserve it, he's just not good enough to be in the LCS. Except for Coach Seal, who was like, what are you guys talking about? Do you guys not have eyes? Well, to me, actually, he said that to me because I made a video about Bvoy. And then I was like, but I wasn't the one saying this. Like, here, look at this guy. He was like, oh, he's just old and molding. And then I was like, what about her? He's like, I respect her, but I disagree. I'm like, what? Go on.
Yeah,
but what about...
I agree. Like, it's good that he said that because he is, you don't just become like the GOAT of your like scene for like a reason. Like in LLA he did fine, in Brazil he did fine, and like I'm supposed to suddenly believe that, oh, if he comes over to NA he's just gonna be terrible, like he's just gonna get washed. Like no, that's not gonna happen. That won't happen. You guys are overreacting. Like I get why, but like they were overreacting.
Yeah, and I think the best part about that is that he looks like he's at least equal or better than Turtle, which is something like Turtle week 1. Oh my god, I think he played the best, like 80, like you said, probably best Lucian in the West. He was playing so well. Sucks that they lost those games, but then you're like, okay, is Bvoy going to be able to like match that level of carry? And I think so far he's been doing fine. What about Zeyzal? Zeyzal is someone who people just like forget and like don't talk about at all. And it's not that he's not invisible in the games. Like there are some good plays that he makes, but just I haven't heard anything about Zeyzal. I have a player I compare him to. I compare him to Bible. I don't know who you know. I don't know if you know who that is. Yeah, LCK. Yeah. Yeah. So when I did my scouting last year, he played in the Challengers League for LCK, and what this guy did that was really annoying and tested a lot of supports was that he would just stand in front of you and pressure you, even though he had absolutely no business doing it. Like he just had supreme confidence that like, oh, what are you gonna do? You're gonna walk in front of me? Like I'm not, and then you just don't do it because you're just kind of afraid. That's what Zeyzal does. I think Zeyzal does a good job of just. There will be players who like see like Vulcan and they're like, oh my god, we're playing against Vulcan. Like, oh man, I'm gonna mess up, and like this guy's so good. Zeyzal doesn't care. He doesn't give a shit. Like personally, like I think he just knows what he's about and feels confident about it. And yeah, I don't think he's the best mechanically. There's a reason why they're banning Ashe. I don't think like they are gonna like run bot lanes off his play per se, but I think because he has this mentality, like the right mentality, that does help a ton. And it's not like he's not going to be able to make plays either. It's not like League is the hardest game in the world to play, especially from support side if you're playing specific picks. But yeah, that's like how I would compare him. Like it's someone who just has a ton of confidence in themselves, and they're not getting blocked out like by like I'm playing against X player or X like matchup or whatever. Like he just does his thing. So that's kind of, I guess maybe that's why people don't say too much about him, but like that's how I see it. All right, that's cool. I did not notice that he plays with such confidence. I feel like from looking at him, he always knows what he wants to do. And there's not many moments where I'm like, oh, this guy's hesitating, he doesn't know what he's doing, or like I'm questioning like what's he doing. It's always like very, very clear, like, oh, we're gonna turn here, or like we're gonna go in, we're backing out, we're pushing them off and backing. So it's cool to see that he has that confidence. Next person I want to talk about is Insanity. So Insanity has played a lot of the like tank mids, and he played Garen once as well, but he also played 2 games of Orianna. The first game he played really well. The second game was against Zeyzal. He couldn't do anything. Zeyzal just presses W and Q, and you can't do anything or you die. So what's the heat check on Insanity? Is he like as good as he was last split? Because last split he was really making the difference for TSM. Like if Insanity had a good game, TSM won. If Insanity didn't, like there was no hope of that team winning. So is he the carry of Shopify?
Right now, no. Right now, like it's definitely Bvoy as their core carry and Bugi. Like these are the 2 main guys who are like doing what they need to do. Like I said, I think if he is on Orianna and he has good games, that elevates the team a ton, because like I said, I don't think Fakegod is playing the best per se and not contributing as enough as he can. So when Insanity can add that, now you have like 3 guys who are like adding onto it, which helps a ton. I think his Orianna games have been actually better than I expected. Like I wasn't exactly sure why they were committing to tanks as much as they were. And it maybe had some worry on like, is he just not confident on like playing the meta picks, which obviously if that was the case, that'd be bad. But the fact that he is playing into it and up to par versus like better player, like essentially what people would view as better players, means that he might be on the like upswing now, and that will be a good sign for him. I think one issue that I see with him, and I also do see it with Palafox as well, is that when you get into some of these tight fights where it's like in the end it's just like, did you execute well? And you kind of fumble it, like he did like in the Zac game. He kind of fumbled it a little bit. That is where the better player will actually shine. And that's something that he needs to do. Like last year, I feel like, or last split more specifically, I felt like he also had certain picks that really did kind of perform better. Like he did have like a lot of Graves mid games that just did phenomenal, right? Can't really play Graves mid right now. Right? Like it's like the meta's a little bit different than it was then, but I don't think that's a reason why he's necessarily like not contributing as much, or like, because he has 2 mage games and then the rest is all like these tanks and melees. I don't think you can have the best picture of him quite yet, or it would not be fair to make that picture yet until he actually is placed on that like active role more, which I do think will benefit them if he is. But they need to actually show it on stage more before, I would necessarily say like he's playing worse, but because I mean he's playing on tank, like he has like some of the lowest CS per minute of anyone else. Why? Because he's on tanks. Like,
so one criticism of last year that I had of him, and this is maybe just a salty TSM fan, was that I felt like his mechanics weren't up to par. I just remember that game 5 playing against Dignitas, and he just gets caught in the Baron pit with flash up, gets caught by a Rakan who has no flash, like ulti Ws, and he doesn't flash that. And then like in the last base defense where they lose game 5, he's standing like right in front of tower trying to hit a Q. He hits the Q, Rakan comes up, flash, and he just doesn't flash it. And when I watch like LPL, which is like the region I probably watch a lot of, like there's no way that, even Fofo when he was playing there wouldn't flash that, or there's no way any player wouldn't flash that. And so my worry was like, okay, he's good. He has picks that people don't know their matchups. He plays very well. But then when I watched his Corki game against IMT, I think, right? No, he played the Akali against you guys. He played Corki against Dig maybe. And he just like missed a bunch of ultis, like a lot of them. And he wasn't like as effective as when, the Corkis back when he was still busted and he just like destroy everyone. So I don't know if that's a worry. He looked pretty good mechanically on Ori.
So, I mean, one reason why I think it was rather good for him to look as good as he did on this pick specifically is I kind of see him as like an expert on many, but a master on none. I mean, like yeah, he plays a ton of picks. Like there's like an ERL mid laner named Random who literally plays a ton of different picks. But I would not say he's amazing at any of these picks. It's just he knows how to pull out whatever picks he can, which is very beneficial. And so I view Insanity kind of leans a little bit more on having this variety to like whip out and get like a comp advantage or like have surprise advantage, whatever. Mechanically, yeah, sure. Like he's not as good as JoJo, right? Like this is not happening. I don't think he's good as Mask or good as Dove, mechanically. But it's not like you can't get better at those aspects. But you can only go so far, I'll admit, as a player. Like in the end, like, do I think he would ever catch up to JoJo? No, of course not. Like, I don't think he would ever catch up to him mechanically. However, you can be smarter than him. Like, people will have said for the longest time now, for the last like 2 or 3 years, Faker's not the most mechanically like best mid laner, which is true, and yet he's winning because he's reached a point in his career where he knows and he understands how the game should be played so well. Like, oh, I have but of course I will also say it's a little rare exception in that he has incredible teammates that he can play that way specifically because of them. just to say that, like, obviously if you have Zeus and it's like my top's gonna win out, like, yeah, it's okay for me to sack, be present for this next fight, even though I'm sacking like a little bit, just so I'm there and we're gonna win, right? I don't know if you can't have that same confidence per se as Insanity with this team, but just being smarter actually does pan out rather well. Like, there will be times where you will get outskilled, but being smarter overall, they probably would get a couple more wins off that.
You can now become a member of my channel to get early access to all my videos, private polls, chat rooms, and updates, and to say in what direction I take my content in. So make sure to check it out. Okay, so it seems like, I guess the first thing I think of is it might just be better for him to invest his time in having a better comp advantage because he can play Zac, he can play, Graves, or he can play the Sejuani mid, and he can get an advantage because he has a unfair advantage in the knowledge of the matchup and the skill of the game than rather trying to catch up to a Showmaker or a Chovy or a JoJo. So I guess from that aspect, it almost means like maybe he should invest even more into these picks so that he has these weapons. He doesn't have to use them all the time, but the fact that he has them is already, an advantage.
Yeah. So the only thing is, he has to practice the other picks a little bit at the very least, right? Because if those picks become too strong, like Azir, and so you're always banning Azir because it's just so strong, that becomes a detriment to like your kind of overall plan. But it is true, like, if he does have other picks at his disposal, it is rather annoying because he understands the pick better than other people. Hence also why Whippo, who plays a variety of picks, really understands, like, this is like what my pick does and how I'm going to use it and everything. And other people are like, I don't know what to do versus that, right? So like Whippo plays on that too. And Whippo is also an incredibly smart player. I don't think he's like a mechanically insane player by any means. And that's something Insanity can dip into too. It's just for mid lane, there's definitely some picks that are rather obnoxious. That's not exactly the same as top, especially where top, the dominating pick is like Cassante, which is just an immobile tank. And I say immobile tank as like, yes, he has a dash and stuff, but a lot of the picks that you play into him are also champs that just run around. Like their team fight, like power, like he has to have the right opportunity to do it, but you can kite him just like all these other picks. So it's a little different than mid, which is the only like you can't just whip out Akshan, like it just doesn't work that way compared to like, oh, I'll play Akshan top and I know for sure I'll get advantage because the champion's just annoying up there. So it's a little different. So he still has to practice the meta picks, but that is fair to say that he could dip more into some of these alternatives, and that in lies can get them wins. That is true.
So you mentioned like the power of Azir, and I don't necessarily understand why Shopify keeps banning Azir when Insanity has shown that he can win against an Azir using Xerath. And I'm sure he probably has other picks that they could play against Azir. And like talking to other pro players, there are a lot of people who just think he's not as OP as people make him out to be. Specifically Palafox, he's like, I think that's just turbo bait. Like Azir is not, like, there are situations where he's really good, but he's just not the as broken as people make him seem to be. So like, why aren't people just countering Azir more?
So this upcoming patch, actually, is it this current patch now? I think it's this current patch now. It's actually a little bit weaker because they nerfed his base regen. So like more poke heavy champs can excel more into Azir. But the itemization, and also again, the itemization also helps that like Luden's got a little buff and like some other stuff to kind of help the other champs that did well into him. Like you see a good Ori into Azir, a good Ori will win. Like she'll chunk him out and she can win versus him. But no matter what, Azir is essentially a power pick. And he performs into a lot of different picks. Yes, you can build a comp around him, but he is still a rather good pick just to learn and have. I know Palfox says he's bait, but also he he did better this time, but he did lose as Talia into Azir both times into C9. So it's not like, how would I say it? I don't think it's bait. I still think it's a good pick. But if you do want to have a counter to it or like a plan around it, that's fine. Just understand that if it does farm and get to does farm and does like a good Azir, like a JoJo Azir will like do well in lane, it's going to be a problem no matter what. Just kind of how it is.
Well, I was actually gonna mention that. It's like, well, in Palafox situation, he's playing against JoJo. He probably loses everything to JoJo. But the last person we haven't mentioned is Fakegod. Well, we did mention it, but we haven't like talked about him in depth. So my perspective on Fakegod, my perception, there we go, is that he played really poorly the first like 2-3 games, and then he started playing better. And I feel like each week that goes by, he's playing better and he's playing more coordinated. I think like the first week, he was just like non-existent in team fights, and like his rumble was like left a lot to be desired. I think he's playing better. And I talked to Revan about it, and he said he's like one of the most diligent players on the team. And like if there's something that's going wrong, he will like improve. And I talked to Fakegod, and he was like, guys, don't worry. I will carry. If I have to, like I will push myself, and I will figure out how to carry this team. So don't worry. So do you feel like he's actually been improving, or maybe it's just like the champs that they're putting him on?
I mean, like I said, he played 2 Udyr games and they won with Udyr. And the champion is rather good in lane. And he did do his job in those games. So it's not like I'm not going to like discount that or anything. He played it better than Dokla, for instance, who has a terrible Udyr. I'm not trying to throw just shade on the side, but that is true. So also, if you know anything about Fakegod, he was in LCS right prior, and it was like really rough. And he kind of got his confidence back in NACL. And I remember him doing a post talking about all this stuff, and then also just like how he's changed his perspective and how he thinks about the game, which definitely shows and is why he landed a spot on Shopify. But he says always been known as just a bruiser player, which is kind of aligning on what we're seeing still, which long term won't be good unless like there's like some changes there. And I do think playing Udyr, if you can figure it out a bit, it is not like a hard pick. Like as long as you fundamentally understand like what you have to do with your spells, like you're using W to vamp, you're not just burning your R all the time. And you're like, just in terms of fights, you just run at them, and then you kind of just like go in between. Like you don't try to like fully run at them, you're just trying to bait them, like draw their time. And Aatrox is definitely his best pick by far. Kind of similar to like Sniper, like Aatrox is like one of his best picks. And so like when Fakegod's on that pick, I definitely would feel confident with the team. Like, okay, yeah, I think he can play some of these fights and stuff like that out. But once you start moving away from those two, I get less confident, and he can have a really good work ethic and everything, but you do need to have the champ pool and like the right tools to perform still. So like he can have like the right mindset, but it doesn't mean he's going to necessarily learn these picks quickly or become good enough on these picks quickly. And I think the top lane pool for LCS this year is actually not bad at all. Like you got Rich, Impact, Fudge, Sniper's doing well. Oh God, who am I forgetting?
Castle.
Castle's been not half bad, honestly. No, yeah, I know, but like, I'm thinking of like trying to think of the guys who are very clearly showing some like forward, like oh God, like yeah. And oh, did I say Whippo? I don't think I said
No.
Whippo, but like the like upper half level has definitely I feel like risen up because Whippo's been added to the pool. And there's just a lot to improve on. There's a lot to work on.
Do you think he's better, or I guess, do you think Fakegod is better than Hanser?
Yes,
Okay.
I think so. Like, look, Hanser was not good. I'm gonna be real. Like, Hanser wasn't good. The fact that he won so many games with him was pretty impressive. I'm not trying to flame him, and like he did play solo queue and get himself back up, which was really good by him. But personally, like if you watch some of those games, like it's like this wasn't good. Like this, if you had a better top laner, I guarantee it. Like those would have been even more interesting games last split. Yeah.
Yeah, his Gwen game, I remember they put him on carry once, and then they were like, never again.
Yeah, so it's like, I think Fakegod's okay. I don't rate him too highly still at all. Like he's gonna really need to work on expanding and then showing what he's got in fights. Because if that was my main issue with Sniper. Like for me, I felt like Sniper wasn't contributing a lot in the team fights, and that was really holding me back on saying like if he's really like what he is. But the fact that that's now happening, it's like, oh, okay, well, now he's pretty damn good actually. But with Fakegod, like that has to show, that has to happen, and when that happens, then I'll be like, okay, great, you got a top laner. That's how I feel.
Yeah, no, it's fair. I think especially the first, like I said, the first couple weeks, people were like, where is Fakegod? We didn't even like, the casters didn't barely said his name like once or twice, and that was when they were diving him or they caught him gank. So I do think there's like fair criticism toward Fakegod, and I think he knows that as well. So yeah, thank you for like going through all the players and like the drafts and all that stuff into like detail of like how an analyst would kind of look at it rather than just like a fan reacting to the plays. My last question is, where do you think Shopify lacks the most? Because it seems like they have leadership, they have the players that can, you know, carry the games in Bvoy or Bugi. It seems like they have pieces that can win, but they're not. So like, what is it that they're missing that could fit it all together? Is it just like a better top laner?
I mean, so you're going to be gated a little bit by the players you have in the end. Like I said, like I think Zeyzal's not the best mechanically player. He's not the best lane guy per se. And that will prohibit you from beating certain teams or certain players in bot lane from that alone. Granted, you can do picks that kind of alleviate that. You can path down there and kind of make like the situation different. But that will actually matter. And the same can be said for top lane. You know, there will be situations where it's just like you can't really to draft around this per se. But is it necessarily just because of the players? Honestly, a little bit. I don't mean to be mean, but like it is a little bit. The reality is when you're an organization and you're looking at how you're gonna win games and stuff, scouting does matter. Like player scouting does matter. In the end, the team you build is the team you have, and you can only take it so far. And I think with these guys, if they play like a 5 squad and they have the right comps, at least like your draft is going in fine. You're not have a disadvantage in draft, because if they have a disadvantage, it's bad. And you play the way you want to play, like for whatever game they have, which is most likely pathing into bot, playing around mid, and you make that work, yeah, you can pick up wins. Do I think you're going to win LCS with this guys? Probably not, and that's probably also not even their org's goal, honestly. Like, I'm sure their org's goal is literally not like, oh, we're going to win LCS with this squad. Like, no. I'm sure most of these guys are on the min salary, right? So...
No, actually.
They're not?
I don't know specifics, but I do know that Shopify spent good money.
Oof. See, I think Bugi deserves it, for instance. I think Insanity after his performance deserves it. I can see Bvoy making it, but for me, like for my top and support, I wouldn't be spending big bucks on them, because in the end, it's like, you know, But even then, for even something like Insanity, like you wouldn't be spending too much because, yes, I don't think this is gonna be replicated like the same as Spring necessarily. Like that's not a guarantee at all. So as an org, I'm assuming this team will make playoffs. I assume this team will be a middle of the pack team, and if they perform higher than that, awesome. Like it's just how the players that you chose and how you went about it. And if you want to pull more out of it, go top 3 or something. But like that's to me like the farthest like in theory this team will go. I want to say in theory, right? It's really important to stress that because I know like the theory of C9 is they will win like the entire LCS, right? But they're doing bad. So like you never know how that's gonna go, but that's just like from an analyst point of view and like a player scouting point of view, you definitely have expectations set on the guys you're getting. And I think a lot of fans just like want to just be like, well, who's gonna win, right? Like what can we do to be even better? It's like, oh, like I guess you get this guy or maybe get this guy. Maybe you get more coaching staff because keep in mind they have a small coaching staff, right? And that plays a part. Like I do think having more coaching staff or having like maybe 1 or 2 more strategic like people could help accelerate things. Like I don't know if they have someone who's helping Fakegod all the time.
Not that I know of.
And so that's a big thing. Like, you have a guy coming in, if you had someone specifically positioning coaching him, he might be even better, right? And that's a way to kind of curve out the fact that, well, we can't afford these big time top laners, but I'll invest a little bit in some like side coaching to help this guy, and that maybe that curves it out. But I don't know if Shopify does that or not. So like that's how you kind of get around like some of the like low spending, like doing that. But if it's just Revan and these 5 guys, middle pack sounds fine to me, honestly.
That's what I thought they were coming in with, like more of like a 2-year thing where like the first year we're just going to try and like develop, not necessarily rookies, but just like create a team that Revan is happy with because like he played with all these players before and he handpicked them, right? Mm-hmm. Which I think is great and we should have more of that. I just think we should have more transparency and like he shouldn't wait until the day before LCS starts to like make a 4-minute video explaining why he picked the players instead of like 2 months before when that happened. Sure. But I mean, like to your idea, like it would be really cool to get Licorice as a positional coach for I was going to call him Aatrox for Fakegod just because he plays so much Aatrox. I don't know that Licorice would even want that, but I do think that I personally, as a fan, would like for them to stick with this roster and not like make any changes, especially between splits, just because I want to give Revan and this squad an actual proper shot. And hey, if your like philosophy on the game just doesn't work and you're not able to develop it, then maybe you make changes. But I'm a big fan of like letting a team have 2 splits. So even if like Castle and Mask, like if IMT or if Dignitas don't make it to playoffs, I don't think you make changes. Now, if NRG or C9 don't make it to playoffs, that's a different story. Those teams have like expectations of like winning, not just, making it to playoffs. So that's a different story. But at least for these like teams like 100 Thieves, basically the predicted bottom 3 or 4 teams, you just run it again and try to improve on the learnings that you have. But yeah, those are all the questions that I had. Is there anything else you feel like maybe we missed?
Actually, there's one thing I just wanted to include on that. Like on the coaching side, like if it really is just Revan, like as a fan, I would not feel expectations that Revan is going to be able to turn this team all on his own either. Like I think it's a big task to be able to help out all 5 players on your own and like taking all our responsibility. Is a reason why, for instance, to me, FlyQuest has the best drafts in a sense that they have Nuke Duck, they have Richard, they have Arrow, like they have all these guys who are really strategically well like rounded, and so like their players have a ton of help in additional minds, and that goes a long way. In fact, they might be probably the most invested coaching staff outside of C9.
C9?
In LCS maybe. Yeah, it's because C9 has Mithy, they have Veigar, and like other guys, like big strategic mind guys to help out the players and like coach them, especially on the individual side. And I think FlyQuest definitely has that. But if Shopify only has Revan, I can tell you, like, trying to focus on main points for macro, trying to focus on personalities, trying to focus on individual specifics, that's a lot. That's really a lot. So I could see a world where they might still replace a player or two, but personally, from like my side, it'd be like, well, you didn't really invest the right way with them anyways, so it's like they got an unfair shot on doing it, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is, because that's just how you're investing your coaching staff. So that's like just the one thing I wanted to add.
Yeah, I think Turtle is acting as a coach, and I don't know about Tomio, but I know that he helps in the team. And I know Zeyzal is like a secondary coach. Like, he talks a lot and he helps Revan with like reviews and whatnot. But at the end of the day, he's still a player. Funny enough, I was talking to Joey and I was like, yeah, it's just you and Sharks, really. And he was like, well, we have like one more coach that he mentioned. I forgot his name. And then all our players like are so motivated and they're always helping each other learn. So it's almost like we have 8 coaches. I don't want to say like, I don't think that's exactly it. I mean, you have like maybe proactive players that help each other. Like Ole is always going to Armeo and telling him like, hey, this is how I would play it. Maybe do this. But I don't think that quantifies as or classifies as a coach. But yeah,
it's like, it's beneficial and it's good. But it definitely is nice to have someone specifically overwatching what you're doing and focus on what you're doing, compared to like a teammate coming over and is like, well, I don't think you should be doing this at all. But then you're like, what? I should be. What do you mean? Like, because they don't necessarily know your role. Like, it's not always a good transfer of knowledge, technically. So yeah, like I said, I think it would be not like, so they have Turtle. I'm sure Turtle helps out. But usually, like, whatever you perceive as the weakest player is the player you want to have a coach for. So like I said, like FlyQuest, they clearly got Arrow to help their bot lane grow. C9 has whatever they have, but it's like a little different because like they're all, it's not like the same thing, right? But yeah, for teams like that, like I definitely would emphasize that a little bit.
Actually, I did talk to Mithy and asked him about the coaching staff, and he basically just mentioned him in Veigar V2. So yeah, I don't.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know that they still have these like performance or like specific coaches that you're talking about. Maybe they're like more like part time or something, or maybe they bring them in to. I
just assume that they've kept a large like whatever staff they had still, just because, I mean, they have the funds, like they fund, like clearly like they've invested. But it is true, like I'm not 100% sure if it is just Mithy and Veigar, then I guess that's all they have. But they also have naturally 5 veteran players, all experienced in international and everything, compared to, again, Shopify, who, you know, it's not remotely the same.
I actually thought of one more question. So we don't normally have a break in between the split. This isn't even in like the middle. It's just like towards the end. Do you think a break like this benefits teams that are on the top more or teams on the bottom more?
I think it's really going to depend, I think. Because I view it more on whatever the momentum is. So naturally, like 100 Thieves, it like I believe if you went another 3 weeks straight, 100 Thieves could find themselves in first place because they just have the right ideas, they're moving well, and people are still not adjusted to them yet. I think FlyQuest would be up there as well because, again, like you're just kind of progressing, you're just getting wins, things are working out. I think the teams that are like kind of teetering on, like you could even say like team, like we're kind of like teetering between wins and losses. Having this break is really good because now it's like, okay, let's really sit down, analyze like what we're losing to, how we're losing, what can we do to actually kind of get us to the next level. And that might be enough to suddenly get the consistency you want. So for teams like my team who don't have a lot of momentum, this is great. For teams that do have a lot of momentum, like 100 Thieves, like FlyQuest, whatever, kind of sucks. And they have to make sure that they're staying on the same path and trajectory that they already are. Because I remember the best example I can use of this is I remember the first proving grounds they ever added to the secondary league. I was a part of that. There was a month break of just scrimming, just practices. It was terrible. There was no competitive matches. You know, I think my team finished first in the regular split. But like we just weren't the same by the time we got to the end, because it's like you have to be focused and driven to keep on the same like path you were on before. And if you falter, now all these other teams are going to catch up to you. And that's what happened. And so it's the same case. Like if the 100 Thieves get relaxed, they start screwing up or anything like that, or maybe they just go the wrong way, now they might just start dropping losses. And from that second place, maybe they'll become a 5th or 6th place. Like, this break is very good for teams like C9 and like my team, whatever. And if 100 Thieves comes out of it doing just as well, then I think I can say for sure their coaching staff did it. So their coaching staff did a rather good job.
All right. I completely actually agree with you. I think 100 and Dig, this break is not very good for them. I think for teams like NRG and C9, this is a very good time. FlyQuest, I think it's bad for them because I think they've shown the same thing in the past. How many games have we played? 9 games. That just gives people time to catch up, kind of like what you said, even though they're in clear first. And so I think maybe for the top 3 teams, it's not going to be that great. I think for the rest of the league who have problems and are just trying to fit the puzzle, like C9, they're just trying to figure out how to go back to their winning ways. I think it'll be very beneficial.
Yeah.
All right, and hopefully Shopify goes 5-0. So
we'll see. IMT will play them one more time, so
yeah,
hopefully not.
I think whoever wins that game probably goes to playoffs, and whoever doesn't.
Oh, I mean, there's too many games outside of that still. So naturally, we could beat Shopify, and you could win your other 4 games, and we lose the other 4 games, and then we're not making it. So
good point. Yeah, but we'll see. Good luck in all your games except for the Shopify game.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, man. Thank you for your time.
Yep.
Anytime I get to talk about Shopify with anyone, it's always a pleasure. So I really enjoyed having Loyota on and talking about Shopify, and he went into a lot of depth, which I really appreciate. Hopefully when we play Immortals, because obviously he works for Immortals, we beat them. But besides that, I hope we have a good, like, clean, fair, fun match. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Like I said before, I won't have any more post-game interviews until the end of the split. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do for playoffs, but we'll talk about that when that happens. But I will be having this type of interviews. I have one with Loyota. I have one with Raz that's coming up next. So you can look forward to that. I have some other ones I've teased in other videos. But yeah, keep subscribing. Thank you guys so much for your support. A lot of people talk about how toxic the League of Legends community is. You guys have been more than welcoming and very kind and fair with me. So when you guys have criticism, I take it. It hasn't been toxic criticism, so I really appreciate that. Keep giving me feedback, because that's one of the big ways that I can improve in, seeing your feedback and incorporating that. So thank you guys again.